I don't know when it started. Maybe it was always there, lurking in the spaces between my words and yours. But I do know this. Someone or something is listening. It's late. Too late for me to be awake, but here I am, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and an even colder feeling crawling up my spine. You ever have one of those moments where you say something out loud? Something harmless like, I should really clean out the fridge, and then pause because, well, did you actually say it? Or just think it? That's how it began for me. At first, I thought I was imagining things. A slip of memory, maybe fatigue playing tricks on me. But then came the whispers, the ones that weren't mine. They'd come right after I finished speaking, so faint they could have been the wind or the hum of electricity in the walls. Except they weren't random sounds. They were answers. Did you hear that? I asked my roommate once. She looked up from her book, confused. Hear what? Nothing followed. Just silence stretching thin as spider silk. And yet, deep down, I knew something had responded. Something not human. The real trouble started last week. I was arguing with my boss over Zoom about some stupid spreadsheet error. He cut me off mid-sentence, his voice sharp. Wait, who said that? What? I blinked, caught off guard. Said what? That laugh, he said, glancing around his office as if expecting someone to step into frame. There was this weird laugh right after he stopped talking. My stomach dropped. I hadn't laughed. Not once during our call. Afterward, I tried to brush it off as static or a glitch. But the next day, it happened again. This time, I was FaceTiming my mom. We were talking about my dad. He passed away 5 years ago. And she mentioned how much she missed him. There was a beat of silence, heavy with grief, before a voice. Not hers, not mine, whispered softly. She doesn't miss me. I froze. My mom kept talking, oblivious, tears streaming down her face. But I couldn't unhear it. That voice, it wasn't coming through the phone. It was closer, like it was inside my head. By now, you're probably thinking, okay, this is creepy, but what does it mean? Is this some kind of haunting? No, it's not. Because ghosts are bound by rules. They linger in places they died, or attach themselves to objects, or replay traumatic events over and over. What I'm dealing with, it doesn't follow any rules. It doesn't belong anywhere. It exists in the gaps, in the pauses between conversations, in the breaths we take before answering a question, and it knows everything. Last night, I decided to test it. I sat alone in my room, phone on speaker, recording every sound. I picked a topic, something mundane, and started talking aloud. I hate Mondays, I said. Then I waited. For a moment, nothing. Just the soft hum of my ceiling fan turning overhead. And then, you wouldn't hate them if you didn't waste your life chasing deadlines instead of dreams. My blood ran cold. That wasn't me. Not my voice, not my thoughts. Whoever, or whatever, that was, it saw straight through me. Knew exactly where to strike. But it got worse. Much worse. I tried another question, more personal this time. Why can't I sleep anymore? Silence. Long enough that I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the previous response. Then, barely audible, like a whisper carried on the edge of a dream. Because you're afraid of what you'll find when you stop running. Running from what? I wanted to scream. Running from who? And then it hit me. All those little moments over the past few months. The misplaced keys, the forgotten passwords, the way I sometimes woke up disoriented, unsure of which day it was. They weren't accidents. Someone had been messing with me, rearranging my world piece by piece until I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Here's the thing, I'm not crazy. At least I don't think I am. Because other people have noticed too. Like Sarah, my coworker. She called me yesterday, frantic. You need to listen to this, she said without preamble. Her voice trembled as she played a voicemail message. It was garbled, distorted, but unmistakably familiar. Tell her to stop asking questions. That's not possible, I whispered, gripping the edge of my desk. Who sent this? I don't know, she cried. It just appeared on my phone. And it's your voice. Except it wasn't. Not entirely. It sounded like me, sure, but warped, like hearing your own voice underwater. Wrong somehow. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you weren't completely alone in your own mind? Like there's a shadow lurking just behind your thoughts, waiting for the perfect moment to step forward? If you haven't, consider yourself lucky. Because whatever this thing is, it's getting bolder. Last night, As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, it spoke to me again. Louder this time. Clearer. You're not the first person I've found. What do you mean? I whispered into the dark. Some of them fought back. Others gave up. Do you want to know what happens to the ones who give up? No, I choked out. No, I don't. But it told me anyway. And now I understand why it exists. Why it waits in the spaces between our words. It feeds on uncertainty, on fear, on the secrets we bury so deep we convince ourselves they never existed. So here's the question I can't stop thinking about. If it's been watching me, if it knows everything about me, then why hasn't it taken me yet? What's it waiting for? I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, or rather, felt it. Not a shape or a face, but a presence. Something vast and ancient, like the weight of the ocean pressing down on you when you dive too deep. It wasn't just in my apartment anymore. It was inside me. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't risk being around people. Not while this thing was still whispering in the back of my mind. Instead, I spent hours scrolling through forums online, searching for answers. That's when I found them. Posts scattered across message boards, Reddit threads, even archived chat logs from defunct websites. People describing the same thing. Voices in the silence, words spoken after they stopped talking. Some claimed to have recorded it. Others swore it drove them mad. One post stood out, written by a user named Echo Zero. It was chillingly simple. It doesn't want your body. It wants your voice. Beneath those 6 words was a link to an audio file. Against every instinct screaming at me to stop, I clicked play. Static crackled, followed by faint breathing. Then came a voice. My voice, warped and layered with echoes, as though multiple versions of me were speaking at once. Why are you listening to this? It asked. Do you think you can escape what you've already become? I yanked out my earbuds and threw my phone across the room. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. But the worst part wasn't the recording itself. It was the realization that hit me moments later. I recognized the tone, the cadence. That voice, it wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who had ever heard it. That afternoon, I decided to confront Sarah. She'd been acting strange since she played me that voicemail, avoiding my calls and ducking into meetings whenever I approached her desk. When I finally cornered her in the break room, she looked different. Her eyes darted everywhere except at me, and her hand shook as she fumbled with the lid of her coffee cup. What aren't you telling me? I demanded. She hesitated, then leaned in close enough that I could smell the mint gum on her breath. You need to stop asking questions, she whispered. It's not safe. Not safe for who? I shot back. For you? For me? For anyone? She hissed, glancing over her shoulder like someone might be listening. Look, I didn't want to believe it either, but there's something wrong with your voice. Ever since that voicemail showed up on my phone, I keep hearing it, even when you're not around. My stomach churned. What do you mean? I mean, she swallowed hard, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I mean, sometimes I'll say something, a random sentence like, pass the salt, and then your voice finishes it for me, like it's living in my head. We stared at each other in silence, the hum of the vending machine filling the space between us. Finally, she added, and I'm not the only one. Over the next few days, I started noticing changes, not just in Sarah, but in everyone around me. Coworkers would trail off mid-sentence, their expressions blank, before finishing with a phrase that sounded eerily like something I'd said before. Strangers on the street would glance at me, startled, as if recognizing me from somewhere. Even my own reflection seemed off. My mouth moved slightly out of sync with my words, like my lips were trying to catch up to a script I hadn't written. Then came the dreams. At first, they were fragmented, flashes of dark rooms, muffled voices, hands reaching for me from shadows I couldn't penetrate. But last night, it all came together. I stood in a cavernous void, endless and suffocating, surrounded by figures whose faces blurred the moment I tried to focus on them. They spoke in unison, their voices overlapping into a cacophony of whispers. Join us, they said. Let go. No, I whispered, backing away. I won't. One figure stepped forward, its form shifting and flickering like static on an old TV screen. Its voice was mine, but deeper, darker, layered with centuries of malice. You already have. When I woke up, my phone was ringing. Caller ID read unknown. Against my better judgment, I answered, "Hello." My voice trembled. There was no response. Not at first. Just the sound of breathing, slow and deliberate, like whoever was on the other end was savoring the moment. Then, finally, "You're running out of time." "Who is this?" I demanded, gripping the edge of my bed. "What do you want from me?" "We don't want anything," it replied. "You chose this. You opened the door." "What door?" I shouted, tears streaming down my face. I didn't choose anything. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Somewhere, buried beneath layers of denial and fear, I remembered a conversation I'd had years ago, late at night, drunk and desperate for answers. I'd asked the universe, or whatever version of God I thought might be listening, for proof. Proof that I mattered, that my life meant something. And now it was answering. By now, you're probably wondering, what happens next? Does she fight back? Does she give in? Or does she disappear completely, swallowed by the void? Here's the twist. None of that matters. Because the real horror isn't what happens to me. It's what happens to you. Think about it. Have you ever felt like someone else's words were stuck in your head, replaying themselves over and over until they became your own? Have you ever caught yourself saying something and wondered where it came from? Whose thoughts you were borrowing? Because here's the truth. It's not just me. It never was. This thing, the entity, the parasite, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't live in one person. It lives in all of us, in the spaces between our conversations, in the pauses we take before responding, in the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the world. And now, thanks to me, it knows about you too.